thought I'd share this crazy story that happened to me a while back. It's not your typical horror tale, no ghosts or anything like that. It's more like a real-life nightmare that can happen to anyone, especially when you least expect it. Picture this. It was a regular weekday morning. I had to take the train to get to my college. The train was packed, as usual, with commuters heading to work or school. I was one of them, just a young woman trying to get an education. I boarded the train, and being early, I had to squeeze into a spot between two people. Now, you might think, what's so scary about that? Well, that's when things took a turn for the worse. As I stood there, feeling the train jostle and shake with every movement, I noticed a guy pressed up against me. He was a complete stranger, and I didn't know him from Adam. At first, I figured it was just the usual overcrowding on the train. But this was different. He started to get really close. It was like he was using the packed train as an excuse to invade my personal space. I could feel his breath on the back of my neck, and it sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't dare make a sound or say anything. I mean, who wants to make a scene, right? The thing is, it wasn't just an accidental bump or anything. This guy was intentionally getting too close for comfort. I felt trapped, like a cornered animal, but I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing he was scaring me. I kept telling myself it was all in my head, that maybe I was just being paranoid. But it became more and more obvious that this guy was up to no good. He started touching my back, like he was testing the waters. I couldn't believe it. I was frozen in fear, unable to react. As the train continued its journey, I tried to get a glimpse of this creep. He was wearing a hoodie, and his face was partially concealed. I couldn't see his eyes, which made it even more unsettling. He was lurking in the shadows, like a predator stalking his prey. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. The train was still too crowded for me to move or escape. I had no choice but to endure this nightmare. Then, he did something that sent chills down my spine. He whispered in my ear, "You're all alone, aren't you?" My heart raced, and I was sure he could hear it. What did he mean by that? Was he following me? Did he know where I was going? The minutes felt like hours as I stood there, helpless and terrified. I desperately wanted to escape from this situation, but I was trapped. I wished I had the courage to scream for help, but I was paralyzed by fear. Finally, the train arrived at my stop, and I made a run for it. I never looked back, and I didn't care if he followed me. All I wanted was to escape that nightmare. It was just another typical morning for me. I was heading to work, dressed in my waitress uniform, which included the plaid skirt I always wore. My daily routine involved taking the subway to reach the diner where I served tables. Little did I know that this particular journey would turn into a chilling encounter that would haunt me for weeks to come. The subway platform was crowded as usual, with the early morning commuters, all wrapped up in their own world. I found a spot near the doors, pressed against the flow of passengers. It was a typical morning scene, people holding on to their coffee cups and lost in their phones, each in their own bubble. As the train arrived, I stepped on, jostling for space among the other passengers. The tightly packed train left no room to move. I felt uncomfortably close to the strangers around me, but that was nothing new for subway riders. As the train rumbled down the tracks, I noticed a man standing nearby. He appeared like just another commuter, unassuming in his appearance. However, something about him seemed off. He was wearing worn sneakers, and I couldn't help but notice that he kept his head down, seemingly preoccupied with his shoes. My unease grew as I realized that his shoe was right by my feet, seemingly too close for comfort. I glanced down and noticed a small, inconspicuous hole in the front of his shoe. My heart began to race as I put two and two together. It didn't take long for me to realize that he had a camera hidden in his shoe, positioned to record under my skirt. My mind raced, and I couldn't believe what was happening. Panic and anger welled up inside me, but I tried to keep my composure. As I looked around, I noticed that no one else seemed to notice what was happening, or chose to ignore it. It felt as if I were trapped in a nightmare, surrounded by a sea of oblivious faces. My heart sank further as the man's audacity grew. He slid his hand up my leg, reaching higher and higher, even as the subway car grew more crowded. My eyes welled with tears, but I couldn't speak, couldn't cry out for help. I was paralyzed, surrounded by the eerie silence of the other passengers. The man finally withdrew his hand, as calmly as he had begun this horrifying intrusion. He acted like nothing had happened, staring blankly at the floor. My body trembled, and I felt violated. But the people around us continued to ignore the unsettling events that had unfolded. As the subway pulled into my stop, I could hardly believe that I had to face the world outside, carrying this unsettling experience with me. The man got off at the same stop, and I watched as he disappeared into the crowd, just another face in the busy city. I walked to work with a heavy heart, haunted by the indifference of the passengers who had been mere bystanders to my ordeal. It was a chilling reminder of the anonymity that a crowded subway can provide, where true horrors can unfold right in front of you, unnoticed and unchallenged. Hey there, folks. I'm not really the kind of person who shares stuff online, but something happened to me the other night, and I just had to tell someone. I was taking the subway to the museum when I had this really scary experience. So, there I was, minding my own business, just like any other evening. The train was relatively empty, and I had managed to snag a seat near the end of the car. Everything seemed pretty normal until I noticed this homeless guy at the other end. He was lying there, fast asleep. And honestly, I didn't think much of it. It's not uncommon to see people who are down on their luck riding the subway. But then, out of nowhere, this guy jumps up like a bat out of hell, and he's shouting like a maniac. I mean, it was really terrifying. The passengers who were initially sitting near him, they all scattered, and I couldn't blame them. His language was so foul, I won't even repeat it here. He was cussing everyone out, including the air. As if that wasn't bad enough, he suddenly starts doing something unimaginable. I can hardly believe it myself. He squats down right there on the filthy subway floor, and before you know it, he's defecating right there. I was absolutely disgusted, and I could see the other passengers were equally horrified. I mean, who does that? But it didn't stop there. He finishes his business, and then, I kid you not, he picks up a knife. It wasn't a small one either, but a big, menacing blade. At this point, I was scared out of my mind. I knew something was seriously wrong with this guy, and I didn't want to find out the hard way. He starts waving the knife around, and it's chaos in the car. People are screaming, trying to get away from him. The subway doors hadn't closed yet, and some brave soul managed to open them just in the nick of time. A few people managed to escape, but not all of us were so lucky. As the train pulled away, I could hear the screams and commotion behind me. It's the most chilling thing I've ever heard. I don't even want to think about what might have happened to those who couldn't get out in time. I was just so relieved that I was on the side that made it out of there. The police were called, and they managed to catch the man a little later. I'm not sure what they did with him, but I hope he gets the help he needs. I've never been so scared in my entire life. I mean, this was a normal evening commute on the subway, and it turned into something straight out of a horror movie. I'm sharing this with you all to remind you that sometimes the scariest things can happen when you least expect them. Please, stay safe out there, and keep an eye out for your fellow passengers. You never know when you might encounter someone like the madman I met that night. I'm just grateful to have made it out in one piece. And there you have it, folks. My horrifying subway story. I hope you never have to go through anything like it. Take care out there.